This week, we continue the conversation with Dwayne Logan, focusing on his recent short film, Black Thoughts, which he wrote and directed in 2020.
That's the thing. That's the why. And I feel like I can do that through some of the music that I like to send into the world, through the films I like to send into the world, but probably more importantly, through the one-on-one interactions that I have with people.
I immediately thought of Black Thoughts, which Jen sent to me, and I watched it right before we recorded. So I'm going to cry when I talk about this. But I thought that Black Thoughts was so captivating and so thoughtful and so important. As soon as I finished watching it, I immediately looked at Logan and I was like, you need to sit down with Oliver and watch this, because Ollie is 10, but is a year ahead in school. So is wrapping up 5th grade right now, and has been dealing with some kids at school that are saying some stuff they should not be saying. And Oliver is letting us know that these kids are saying things, but I don't think really fully understands the weight of like the way that Black people have been treated and are still treated. And I just thought that like your short film was so good.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and I watched it slowly. I watched, and then I just kind of was like, oh my gosh. And then I would rewind a little bit and rewatch. Like, I thought it was so good and so powerful. So I would love to hear kind of like when you got, because I saw it was uploaded a few years ago. So can we kind of talk about your journey in writing that, and then kind of bringing that to the world? Because it was just like such a moving piece of work. It was like the most important 29 minutes I've spent in a long time, I think.
Oh, man. And so now I'm going to be like on a very, I'm going to be on a cloud of gratitude at this point, because it's just for you to take the time to watch it means so much to me. And then to share that, and to hear that you would want to share that with your family and with others. I mean, that was the dream when making that. If it could go to one person, if they could find value in it and potentially want to share it with someone else or have a conversation, it has achieved that. So thank you for spending time with it. Man, Black Thoughts, it's like a chunk of my soul that's just out there, and I feel so naked when I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The lovely guys over at Evolve, I was still primarily ADing, and we had a meeting, and they were just like, what do you want to make? Like, what's your thing? And we talked about a bunch of different projects. I have this feature that I've been chasing the creation of for years. And they were like, that's amazing. Don't think we can help with that yet, but what else do you have? And so we talked about a bunch of other concepts, and they latched on to this really lovely project that I'm still in the works on called Numbers. And Numbers is a piece that asks a question that I don't have an answer to. And the question is, what could be done to revive some of the cities in America that are so dilapidated, so underserved, just so in despair and in poverty that it seems like there's no going back. And like specifically, it was about Fort Heights, Illinois. It's just outside of the city that my mom moved us to, Chicago Heights. And it was there at this tiny little church where most of my life really made a shift, because I mentioned being a really angry teenager, and man, that shisty kind of strange buddy of mine was working his way into this little church. And long story short with that, before I knew it, I was going there just to kind of follow him for some things. And there's this guy in the choir. I'll never forget. There's a there's a look to people that have been like in the streets, that have like seen it, they've done it. He's got the scar on his face, big burly dude, and there he is in this choir, just tears streaming down his face. Like, that's something I've not seen. I'd seen the hooping and the hollering and a bunch of that stuff. I'd never seen that. And those guys, they took me to, in order to get a ride home one day, they took me to this Alzheimer's unit. And it was an Alzheimer's unit and a hospice unit. And they're singing to people and giving them communion. And I was like, God, I've never seen that. And as we walk out of one of the hospital rooms, there comes the cousin of this girl that was wrecking my life at the time as a girlfriend. And I cussed her out so bad in front of all these pastors and deacons. And I was just reading this poor girl her rights, just saying some of the most terrible things. And they dropped me off at home. And Tony he got out of the van and walked me to the door, and he's like, I got to ask you, like, why are you so angry? You seem so angry. So I cussed him out there. My door's like, stop asking me these stupid questions. Ask me why I'm angry. So I'm cussing this guy out. And he just, in the middle of my rant, just put a hand on my back and pulled me in and gave me a hug and told me he loved me. And I think that was the first time I feel like I'd ever heard it from a man in my entire life. I'd never heard a man tell me that he loved me. And God dang it, before I knew it, I was in the choir. God, I was in the choir. So this tiny little town with nothing in it, it was like murder capital of the United States for so many years running, Fort Heights. And it was just such a rundown town. I kept asking when I would drive through it, what could be done here? Can anything be done here? And I wrote this short, and Evolve was like, this is amazing. We want to get behind it. And some time passed by, and we had it on the slate for production, and that day passed, and then we put it back on the slate, and that date passed, and it just kept getting pushed off. And then Ahmaud Arbery, I'm sorry. Ahmaud Arbery was killed, and it wrecked me. It still wrecks me. How he was they chased him down like he was an animal and killed him in that street. And it was just such a barrage, because we've never had cell phone footage the way that we have now to just really put this stuff in your face. And I was just like, you can't get away from it. And I went back to the guys at Evolve. I was like, guys, I don't think we're going to be able to make numbers, but will you help me make something to just talk about what's happening? And for some reason, I mentioned earlier that I've been this de facto person to go to for like people to just dump things and dump really personal things. And I take pride in being a safe space, but around that time, I was constantly being approached by people who wanted to talk about racism. And 99% of the time, the commentary was, I don't think it exists. Do you agree with me? And they were coming to me almost for this validation of that thought and of that feeling. And I mean, it would be in the most inopportune times. Like, we'd be in the middle of a film shoot, and we're standing like in silence while somebody reads a line. And before you know it, there's a coworker's like, man, I want to talk to you about this like really deep and heavy thing that happens. I want to talk to you about police brutality. I want to talk to you about just all of these really crazy things. And there are also some people very, very close to me that had that conversation with me. They're like, Dwayne, racism died a very long time ago. It is just not a reality. You know, Martin Luther King did his thing, and it has not been an issue since. And so all of these conversations just kept piling on. And then Ahmaud is killed. And so I went to those guys and was like, I think I can keep it really short and really sweet, but I've got this thing in my head. Will you help me make it And Joel and Jesse were so lovely. They were so apologetic. We're so sorry we weren't able to make numbers when we thought we could, but what do you got? How can we help? At the time, also, most production companies, because of COVID, it's tough to think about what's happening at the time, but everyone was really, really tight for cash. I mean, it was just no one was investing in original short film work, especially not stuff that wants to talk about racism. And so it was really incredible that they said yes. And I said, okay, I think it's just going to be like this 5-minute thing. And then before you know it, I started writing and it was a 10-minute thing. And I kept writing and I was like, oh crap, it's like a 15-minute thing. And before I knew it, it was just like, if we're doing this, we should just do it and hopefully have a good conversation. And it became this 30-minute piece where I just wanted to not talk at people, not preach at people, not put people in a classroom, but to ask people to just pause for a second and maybe somehow take their shoes off and wear someone else's. And at the end of that, hopefully there'd be enough experienced in someone else's shoes that would change their perspective on racism, on being Black in America, on how we see and interact with police and how we view the war on drugs. It's so expansive. It feels overwhelming, probably the amount of things that are covered in the piece. But it felt, I'm a big believer that context is king. You can't really understand one thing without the context of another. And so I tried to string together as much of that context as I could in 29 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I know that in it, you mentioned at one point about how schools teach a very white version of history. And it made me think about, when everything was happening, and it felt like tensions were really, really high a handful of years ago. I remember feeling like I don't know where to start educating myself, because I feel like everything that I've ever taken in has been from a white person's perspective. And like, I grew up in a place that was very white, a community that was very, very white. And then my college experience was so tied to my relationship with Logan. And so then you get to this place where like, I wanted to ask questions, but I didn't want to put the burden on the Black community to educate me. But I knew I needed to find the Black voices to share their experience, because because white people have no place to speak on it in my mind. Like, we don't get to have a say in whether or not racism is or isn't happening, because it's not about us. It's about like the Black experience in America. And so like, I follow a lot of creators. I try to like find Black voices to speak to that so that I can kind of get a better idea of it. But like, watching your piece, I felt like it just kind of like reinvigorated that need in me that like, this is so important. And I feel like when you don't know where to start and you don't want to like, I feel like it's such a hard thing to even speak on, because I don't want it to ever come off like I'm trying to find excuses. Like, we all have the internet, right? Like, we all do, but it's also so expansive and we don't know like what is right and what isn't right. I just felt like Black Thoughts was so well done. I thought that you did such a beautiful job with it. And it just really like, it immediately for me, I told Logan at one point, I pulled my headphones off and I was like, I want to find every person that has ever been awful to Dwayne Logan, and I want to immediately throw hands. I want to throw hands,
please,
because you are such a kind person, and it hurts me so badly that people would ever just like assume or treat you a specific way because of the color of your skin. But I know that that's a reality for you, and it's not a reality for me. So I think it's hard to like keep that at the forefront of what's really important when these things are happening. And it's like, everyone wants to defend the idea that like, well, I don't feel that way. So, but it's like, but it's not like, I don't get to speak on it. It's not my experience. I'm not a person of color that has to worry about it. I just thought, I feel like I'm sweating because I don't even know if what I'm saying right now is right. But I just thought Black Thoughts was so beautiful. And I'm so happy that you made it. And I am absolutely looking forward to sharing it with anyone and everyone, because I just thought that I think it did everything that you wanted it to do. And I just think it is like genuinely the most important 29 minutes I've spent in a very, very long time. So I'm just so appreciative to you for making it such a priority and getting it out there, because it's just, man, it will like go down in the history for me of like, you know, top 10 things that I've watched that like really made me pause my life and be like, hey, this is really important. You know, like this deserves the attention that you need to give it. So I thought it was great.
God. Thank you for being so vulnerable about that as well, about your path to being more like conscious and aware of some of these things. And so I think the only real way to make any ground on a lot of that, I think you're already doing the right things. Like you're exposing yourself to things within the experiences that you already have. If you spend some time on social, then maybe like plug some things in on there. And if you're spending some time at whatever things that naturally kind of fit into your life. And I don't know. I feel like there's always a way to say something wrong on this subject, but I think that's the answer for most of us, is to just find things that plug into what we already do. But more than anything, I think it's about community. And you touched on it a bit, like where you're from. If there's not a lot of people of color, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get that heart level bond and experience and information, so that you feel like you can go out into the world and be an advocate. Because I don't know, I've kind of just come to the conclusion that really the only way forward is for us to all have longer tables, and for you to look around the table and intentionally put people at that table that don't look like you. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, the closer to you they get, the more that you can, from a personal standpoint, because it's someone that's close to you, in a personal way, you begin to absorb some of their experiences, and their woes become your woes, and their victories become your victories. But man, there really are some isolated pockets in this country, intentionally isolated, that make that really hard to do. Mm-hmm. So man, and hopefully something like that short, if you don't have a table where you can invite someone in that doesn't look like you and allow them to share their experiences, maybe this short is a nice alternative to that. But it's hard. It really is hard. And I don't know, I think there's been such a brilliant job done in this country to bury a lot of this information as well. Mm-hmm. It really does feel like digging for gems in order to find truth anymore. Mm-hmm. It's so incredibly hard. And now more than ever, we just live in this world where truth is, I mean, what is truth now? Like, how do you define that? What's truth anymore? That word has been so undone. It's so difficult for people to figure out what's heads or tails or propaganda or some sort of agenda, that most people just kind of end up throwing their hands up and saying, well, it'll be what it is. So I don't know. I think your heart is what's truly important. Even if you're not crazy well versed on a lot of the history that's happened in this country, I think your heart is probably the thing that's just so incredibly valuable. Because if we can somehow end up with people that have the heart that you have, that says, I may not know, but I would like to. The heart that says, you know, if I see someone hurting, that hurts me too. I mean, that's 99.9% of the fight right there. Mm-hmm. You may not need to know all of the history, but I genuinely feel like if I were if I were in a really, really bad place and, some terrible things were happening to me, you're not the kind of person that's going to walk right by me and look the other way.
No. Yeah.
And that's the thing that's worth $1,000,001. And I don't know, I love to know how you two came to that place, because I feel like Jen has a very similar heart.
I feel like, I don't know, Jen, if you have thoughts on like how mom and dad kind of spoke to us. I don't feel like I remember a lot of discussions specifically on like race in our house. I just feel like it was like never a thing that I thought about in any type of like negative way. And then like there were literally in my school system, there were 2 Black families. That was it. And I remember I dated one of the brothers. I dated one of the brothers in 7th grade, and then the other one in 8th grade.
Hey, small town.
Hey there. Keep it in the family. And I do remember my grandma making a comment once. But it's funny. I don't remember if she said it to me or if she said it to you, Jen, because you were dating a Black man in college. But she said it to one of us or about us, about our relationship as aren't you worried about what people are going to say? And it hit me in this way of like, what does that even mean? Like, no, I never have thought about that before in my life. And then that comment has stuck with me because it was the first real like negative thing that I could remember being said towards Black people specifically. My grandparents also said a fair amount of not very great things about like Mexican people. But like then once I graduated high school, I immediately went into the groups program at IU, and Jen did too. And it was a program for people whose parents did not go to college. And the program—
Well, there were 3 ways to get into it. It was like a diversity initiative, a financial initiative, a first generation initiative. Like, those are the 3 ways.
Yeah. So going into that program, we would go to school for the summer before college, and then you stayed in the program your entire college career. And then you got basically like rewarded financially for keeping good grades throughout college. But in that program, that summer program, when we all had to move in, I mean, I think that program was probably realistically 90% Black community. Like,
yeah, it was the first time I had ever been in a space where I was a minority.
Yeah.
It was amazing to me because similarly to Kate, like we didn't have, like we had one African-American family and then we had 2, but one of them was like mentally challenged. And so they were always like in a different room. So we really didn't have access to like any culture besides rural white America.
Mm-hmm.
That was it until we went to college. But,
and I just remember that experience being so fun because I felt like for the first time in a really long time, I was around a lot of people that were really fun and cool, but like it didn't feel like anybody was trying. It was like everybody just knew how to like naturally have a good fucking time together and not in a way of like making you feel like you're not cool enough to be in it.
You didn't have to make people feel small to make yourself feel big. It was just like a welcoming community.
Yeah. And it was just so fun. And so I feel like I was just kind of immediately surrounded by it. And I just like loved to spend the time. They did this thing I think it was on Friday. It's called Club Teeter. And they would have like dances and everybody would go down. And I mean, I was used to like very vanilla dances. I remember the first time I went, I was like, oh my God, I did not even know that I could move that way. And I'm watching everybody and it's just like, it was so fun. And it was just this like, I think that's one thing that I have always felt like my white experience has lacked is any sort of like real communal culture. Like I've never felt like there was this village of people that like all just loved to get together and have a good time. And nobody was trying to like use the other person to get something. You know what I mean? It was just like, oh, it was so fun. Everybody was so nice. Ugh, I just loved it. I had a great experience.
Well, I think groups for us was our opportunity, specifically mine and Kate's, to, like you said, to have relationships with people. Like we already had grown up in a home where other people's feelings mattered, period. Like didn't matter who the other person was. But then I think to have relationships with people who had different life stories, who had different life circumstances, you just, when you care for someone, you care about what hurts them. When you care for someone, you care about what makes them happy. And you want an equitable thing for them. You want them to have opportunity. You want them to have their dreams. So I think that that was our opportunity, because a lot of times, like, I'll say it for myself, like, not to disparage our community, but it was like, there was an ignorance that Kate and I both had because of lack of access. It wasn't an ignorance, like willfully, like we just literally didn't have access, and shit, we didn't even have cable TV. I mean, we had like dial-up internet that we were allowed a certain amount of minutes on. And so we really
didn't even get a computer until you were in high school. Yeah.
We just didn't have access. And so I think, our family, like the thing that my parents instilled in us, very much so, was just, we like grew up with Judeo-Christian values, but like we didn't go to church. I remember my parents talking about Jesus. It was like, they talked about like how you treat other people, but it was never under this guise of like, well, you do it so you can have this, or like you do it so when you go to church on Sunday, we didn't even go to church on like Christmas. So it was like, we weren't doing it for anyone else. Like, it was just like, no, this is just what we do to be good people. And my parents, my mom didn't have like a diverse work experience, but my dad did have people of other ethnicities on his like crews that he led for construction work. And he was just always like, there are good Black people, there are good white people, there are bad Black people, there are bad white people. It was just like, it was never a thing for us. And so I think that kind of set the tone. I think a lot of our peers, that probably was not their home conversation, and they had lack of access. So I think that's just like my heart's desire. It's like when you talk about getting into inner cities and feeding into communities that are underserved, it's like, I totally hear that. And that is something that needs to be changed 100%. And my life perspective is like, I want that to happen. And also I want these communities that are, that just don't have access, or they just don't know people. It's like, I want people to have those intimate experiences, because I think when you have them, that's when your heart starts to change. And I think that's what makes Black Thoughts super strong, is there's such a personal side to it. It's an emotionally charged topic, but there's a personal side. It's deeply vulnerable, and it has fact in it. And I think that that's something else. Like, truth is hard to find right now, because everyone wants to just say nothing is true, but it's like, there is fact. And I think if you can really find that key moment where you see that someone's vulnerable and you can hear them because your heart hurts for them because of their vulnerability, I think that's where some of that truth can get in. And that's what I hope for, like the communities that, where I think there are people out there that could be really good advocates for other folks if they just had a little more access in the right way. Because I think there are just a lot of communities that are being kind of robbed of that. Even from like the government standpoint, it's like when you take away textbooks, it's like, okay, we're in a bad space now. I mean, we at least have the internet now. People can at least get on TikTok until they ban that. But it's like, you know what I mean? I mean, that's where I think I would have never thought our country would be shifting in that way. And I was the person in college when I had my first boyfriend that wasn't white, who literally when he was talking to me about racism, I said, I just didn't know that existed. Like, it was like, I just didn't know. It wasn't like I didn't believe him. I just didn't know. And when you're just, when you're just ignorant, when you just don't know, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it easier when people are like, oh, it doesn't exist. You're like, okay, like, I don't know. I still don't know. But when you start to meet people, your heart just, I don't know, it sings a different tune, I think.
You both touched on something that I think is so important to say out loud and say it again for the people in the back, that there are differences in like just differences in people. There are some people, when you start talking about racism and what perpetuates racism, what keeps it alive, what keeps it going, there are humans in this world who, with all their might and intention, want to make sure that that racism does not die, that that is strong and that is alive. And, you know, when people hear the word racism, they think about those guys with shaved heads and the swastikas on their shoulders, and they're burning stuff and they're marching down and they're throwing up all sorts of terrible symbols and salutes. Those people exist. There are also the people in other positions of power, from, you know, corporate leaderships and policymakers, who very intentionally are making sure these terrible things remain. But there are also people who just have never been given an opportunity to broaden their sight. They live in worlds. My wife is from Wapakoneta, Ohio.
Oh.
And I mean, one of the first things I heard about Wapakoneta, Ohio, is that not terribly long ago, it was a sundown town. Mm-hmm. And sundown towns, you know, it's those places where, you know, if you're Black, you better be gone by the time the sun goes down, which is funny because the name of the town is named after a bunch of Native American tribes. So it's just like, how does that work exactly? But anyway, but there are so many people that are there in this tiny little dot on the map, and they live in this tiny little bubble. And it is not because of hatred that they think racism doesn't exist. They don't think that because they are cross-burning Nazis. They don't think racism exists because they've lived in such a tiny world with so little exposure to anything outside of that world that they can't even comprehend its existence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I love that you both like touched on just like the world that you came from as well. And I really get frustrated when there's some people that try to stand up for human rights and they just want to point this finger and group everybody together. And you, like white people, I despise that. I hate that because it's just not fair. It's just not fair. There really are people who they just need an opportunity to see more. And that opportunity is kind of tricky to come by when your day-to-day interactions don't offer very much in the way of, you know, some engaging path toward learning more. I mean, for someone in Wapakoneta, Ohio today, sure, you know, we say that Google exists. Sure, it should be easier because I do think Black culture is inevitably everywhere at all times. Like you kind of can't get away from it. Mm-hmm. From music to film, it's just everywhere. And so it is ubiquitous. But at the same time, that's not enough. Like, because you know who Nelly is, that's not enough to give you a heart that sympathizes and empathizes with another culture. And so I think it's so important that you guys point that out, that like there really are the pockets of people who just need an opportunity, and hopefully something like Black Thoughts can kind of sneak into some of those communities where they haven't had a chance to extend their table yet, but maybe it makes them want to. And man, it's just been the little film that could. There's a group of people that are using it weekly for study sessions in these groups, and they break it down frame by frame almost. I mean, I'm almost nervous when I talk to them because they know the subject matter so thoroughly now because they've spent the time in these gigantic groups, and it's nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
There are people nationwide that tune in, and it turned into several meetings that I've had here in Los Angeles. People from these groups that have met with me to talk about their experience with the film and to tell me to please continue to create. And Aaron, I'm not sure if you guys potentially know him. He's a Nashville native. Worked in art department for a bit, and he's leading that charge. He is one of the most passionate humans I've ever met about civil rights and social justice and things like that. And I mean, I steal from his fire every chance I get to, he's one of those people that's going to make sure that the world's different by the time he dies. He's leading these groups that are really making great use of it. It's been in prisons. It's been shown in schools. It's been shown in Fortune 500 company boardrooms. I mean, I just never would have imagined it. And when Joel and Jesse, when we first made it, they were like, well, who do you want to see this? And my answer being, I just hope one person sees it. It wasn't long before all of a sudden people were like, put it in film festivals. And I knew nothing about festivals. And before you know it, it's taking me to places like DC, and it's being shown at the, the National Museum of Art in DC. I think I'm butchering that name, but it's just these incredible places. And it's doing things like what we're doing right now, giving us an opportunity to have conversations about tough things. And I think there's this really beautiful thing that happens where I don't think we're going to hang up from this call and immediately go out and do something that changes the world. But these things, they leave these little nuggets and diamonds in your heart. And the next time that, I don't know, you're in the grocery store, at a gas station, or at a school pickup line, it's just wherever you go in your life, these things they stay with you, and they carry with you, and they change your actions, and they change the way you see and the way you think. And so the fact that it's led to these kinds of moments, I'm just beyond grateful for it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you take all of your flowers on it, because that short film deserves to be in every place that you just mentioned that it is, and more. I mean, it is truly the way that you broke it all down and spoke to all of the, I mean, the section on Black on Black crime, I thought was so powerful, in the way that you break down the way that that Black people have been told that they are, and that they're kind of raised in these spaces where they just people are just kind of constantly beating you down. And so how do you expect to be anything other than what they're telling you that you are? And I just think that I think it's such a powerful film for everybody, for white people, for Black people, for everybody to be watching it, because I think it just shows it just really speaks to ways that we all need to be thinking about things, and changing the way that we treat other people, and the way that we allow others to be treated also, because it just has to stop. It has to stop. And I think that was, for me watching it, I just thought, I just felt so mad during so many parts of it, because, you talked about how I live my life and I do 50 things and I'm doing, and it's and I don't have that added unfair layer that the Black community has. And so it just this shit has to end. And I don't know what the answer is, but I think that getting this out to as many people as possible is so needed. So I know I'll be playing my part, my tiny little part in it, as much as I can. And I'm sure Jen will too. And this podcast will air it out. And I just, man, you just deserve all of the praise that you're getting on it, because it is truly really, really powerful. So
I'm so full from that. And even just the section that you pointed out, there's this young man, he's a rapper out of inner city Chicago, and it's just burned into my brain. There's this interviewer that's so proud of himself that he managed to get through this really terrible neighborhood to conduct this interview with this rapper on his porch. And he asked a question. He's like, did you guys, like, when did you know I was here? He's like, we knew you were here about 5 blocks out. He's like, how did you know? He's like, come on, man. And so he kind of lays off of that. And the rapper basically explains to him, he's like, you don't understand like how much this place is a prison. Like, we have to know that you're here 5 blocks out. Because if we don't know that you're here 5 blocks out, do you understand what happens to my family, to my grandmother, to my niece, to my daughter, to my neighbor? If I don't know that you're here 5 blocks out, somebody that I love is probably going to die. And the reality check of that like that's someone's existence day in, day out.
Yeah.
That they have to be on guard on over whether or not someone is arriving to either kill them or somebody that they love here in America. And it is designed for them to not be able to escape that radius. Mm-hmm. And so if he's got to be aware of what happens within those 5 blocks, the guys on the outside of those 5 blocks have to be equally as aware. And when you put a bunch of those 5 block chunks next to each other, where are any of them going to go?
Yeah.
Like the dream capacity, that ceiling is so low. It's so short. Mm-hmm. They are literally focused on one thing and one thing only, and it's on getting to tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And can I get to tomorrow with as little difficulty as possible? And then when on the outside of that environment, people look at it, it's like, well, look at them. Look at all the crazy things they're doing. Well, how long would it take for you if I showed up and I killed your cousin or your daughter or your mother or your child? How long would it take for you to forgive me and say, you know what, let's call it square. Let's call it peace. How long would it take for you to arrive at that point? And maybe you get to that place. It's like, okay, I'm willing to say, like, so be it. Like, you took these people that I love, and then they take another one. And then you say, so be it. And they take another one. Mm-hmm. And then you try to leave your 5 block box. And you're supposed to just make this wild assumption that they're going to give you the same grace you gave them. It's a prison.
Yeah.
It's a prison. And the fact that you just latched onto that and just like and I think about my brother, he calls me ever so often. He's the one that really just got sucked into that world pretty hard. And I managed for the most part to steer clear of it. But often when he calls me, one of the first things that comes to my mind is, who is he going to tell me just got shot or just got killed or is no longer alive from our old neighborhood? Mm-hmm. And there's a 7 out of 10 chance that's what the call is going to be. And I can't tell you how many people that I went to school with that you would have looked at them and it's like the future is theirs that are no longer living. Mm-hmm. And it's because of those prisons that, as much as we like to deny it, they were made on purpose. Like those environments in those cities, they're constructed. They didn't happen by accident. See, I'm going to get on a soapbox. I'll come off of it. I get so worked up about that. And it just filled my heart so much that was a part of the film that you called out specifically.
Yeah. Well, it's devastating and it's beautifully shot. And I just cannot, it made me feel a little teary again, hearing you talk about that, because it's just like, again, how proud your mom must be to know that through all of it, you ended up where you're at now and you're still remembering where you came from and wanting to help, that like desire to help rather than to think, well, I escaped that, like good luck to everybody back there. It's like your heart is still right there and your heart is still saying, what can I do to help this community that feels helpless? And you're putting out media that is so important and is reaching people like me that grew up in areas where I didn't have a lot of access to that. And I'm going to share that with my kids, and I'm going to share that with my friends who will share it with their kids. And I think that that's like the hope that we can have, you know, is that like people are going to care and they're going to share it. And it's all tied back to you and how you grew up in that space with a mother that is like beyond anything I can describe. And now you're like, you're doing it, dude. Like you're doing everything that she could have ever hoped for and more. I mean, like, I hope that you are like so proud of yourself. I know your mom is so proud of you and your siblings are so proud of you and your wife, who I'm sure wishes that would be done with this interview. So we will find a way to wrap it up. But man, I think you are like one of my favorite people that I barely know. And I just am like so happy that you decided to come on this podcast and talk to us about it. Like, I just feel really, really fortunate that you're here.
And it's also just amazing for you to use your talents in such a way that provides for your family, provides for the people that you care about by giving a voice to things that are going on. And then also just to do it in such a beautiful way. I mean, I think Kate mentioned it, but the aesthetic of the video is also just, it's gorgeous. And
my gosh.
So I think that just, you're putting all the ingredients together for social change, for, beautiful media to be put out in the world. And there's plenty of media that does not promote beautiful things. And so it's just an honor to know you and to be your friend and to see the work that you're putting out. And I'm super excited for whatever you have on those whiteboards on either side of your room that you're working on, because I'm sure they're going to be amazing.
Yes.
And we are so grateful that you spent some time to chat with us, and so excited for you and your adventure in LA and wherever that's going to take you and your sweet family. But thanks so much for being here, and keep us posted on all the fun things that you have going on, please.
Man,
and Kate wants to meet your mom, so
I do.
Schedule a date.
We can totally arrange it. She is a total like party on two legs, man. You'll love Carol. You'll love her, and this has been such a joy. And say positive things, put those words out into the atmosphere for me, and whether it's a prayer or just a go get it, Dwayne. I mean, I feel so charged up just after this conversation. Kate, like I think your words, you're doing it, are so powerful, because it's funny how many days can go by where, we only hear the people that are really close to us and around us. And sometimes those voices aren't as impactful. And I got to hear you're doing it here in these moments and in minutes. And I'm just like, am I doing it? All right.
I think you're doing it.
Yes. And so I'm all charged up from that. That was a jolt of energy and positivity. That's so I'm so appreciative of. And I think at the end of the day, some of the things that I like to make and some of the stories that I like to tell, they all seem to touch on things that I want to change. And I know there's a fatigue in society for a lot of that. I think people just kind of want to be left alone and let me just watch Fast and Furious 75, but man, it'd be nice to just kind of sneak in there every now and then, something that might make a difference. And so thank you for the push and for the motivation. And I don't know how much of it I'll get done, but I'll definitely die with hopefully the ability to say that I tried.
I think you are doing a great job.